Hello guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Swadhin. Today we'll be learning React components. Let's get started. So what is this component? Components let you split the UI into independent and reusable pieces. What do you mean by that? When you go to your browser or go to a particular site like Google, whatever you see there, it's basically combination of all the HTML element inside the DOM. Instead of having one page for everything, we can divide that into small reusable blocks. Means we can divide this entire Google page into small four blocks. So what is the benefit of that? Whenever I change something in this navigation here, it will not impact all these three other components. So it will be independent, and to rendering this one will not affect all this other component. This is one benefit of having components. The second one is will be we can reuse this component again also. Means suppose in our website I need a search bar again, then I can use this component whichever we already have rather than creating a new React components. And we can convert this entire page into small components like this. Like we have here 1 2 3 4 5. These are the components we have separated, and at the end it will combine it and it will form a tree like structure like this, and it will be converted into DOM and we'll see the same exact page whatever we are seeing it. So for a user perspective, we are not changing anything. But for a architecture perspective, we have a separate block for each part. So whenever you find a issue, suppose we have an issue in 3 block, then will not affect 1, 2, and 4 and 5. We'll change only this part. So, and this is independent of other components. And the second thing, we can reuse also the components. Okay, so basically in a simplest form, a component can be described as a JavaScript function which is returning a React elements. Okay, so these components are divided into two parts. Those are, first one is called as function. As I told you, in a simplest way, a component can be defined as a JavaScript function which is returning a React element. Like you can see that in the down, we have a function defined which is called as welcome, and it is returning some HTML looking like elements. And these we call as JSX, JavaScript XML. These are not HTML. These are JavaScript code which is looking like HTML. We'll learn that in a minute about that. And the important part about this functional component is something we pass in the arguments that is called props, which stands for property. Okay, and according to this property, we'll print something inside our component. Okay, and basically functional component as called as presentational component or a stateless component, and it will only render the same thing what we are defining. Okay, it will not change with the data. That's why we called as functional component to this, and it will be behave as a UI element. If you want to reuse it, you can reuse that. There is another way we can define components in React that we call class component, and this is basically taking our ES6 syntax to create a class which will be extended from React component. React is a library which will be already there when we do create React app, and from that we'll take a class called component, and when I extend from there, I'll get some by default method. And if you compare this code with this code, we have an additional method here that is called render, which is given by this react.component class. And along with that, we'll get more facility or more methods. We'll be discussing that in our video, but this is the advanced thing we'll get rather than having a simple function. Okay, and if you compare this code which is written here, it will do the exactly same job. Okay, the output will be exactly same, but we can do many things using class component which we can't do in function component. Okay, so functional component generally called as stateless component, and this class we call as a stateful component. And what do you mean by stateful component? Stateful component keep track of our data. Means whenever we change the data, our component will re-render. Okay, so that's why we have something called state. Okay, and the state is nothing but a data, and it may be something because of a database got modified, because of user changed something, and for anything whenever the data change, it will re-render the entire components. Okay, and that's why we call this a stateful component or a container. Okay, because it will contain everything, and it have a ability to compare with the data and change your component wisely. Rather than in our functional component, we didn't have that option. We didn't have to store a data, and on the change of the data, we can wouldn't be changing, re-rendering the component. In case of class component, we have the flexibility on that. In case of functional component, we'll only pass the property as a parameter to that function, and on the basis of that property it will print that thing. But in case of stateful component, we'll be changing the state. Like you can see that on the basis of state, we'll be re-rendering the entire component. Okay, so that we call as stateful components. And let's move to our Visual Studio to start to see what is basically there.
I will provide the link in the description or the I button. And before going to this part, I will just explain few things from that video. So in that video, we already saw that like our index.html, which is there in the public folder, have an element called root, and that root element we are getting inside our src index.js using get element by id. And after getting that element, we are injecting something called app component, and this app component is nothing but a app.js file inside our src folder. And we are doing all this thing using this React DOM.render method. And React DOM is a component which we use along with React to build our React applications. And if you see that if I run this project and if we go to the browser, you can see this is the output we are getting. And this is basically coming from our app component, because if you go to our index.html, we don't have any code there. We don't have any code there. All this code, whatever you're seeing, is coming from this component. And if you observe it closely, this index.js, how this rendering is happening, it's basically taking whatever you have written in this app component and injecting that into root component. Okay, so observe, if I change this app component, see now if you see the page here, this is what we are getting. This is we are getting from the app component. If I change something here, if I remove this app component from here and pass some random elements, means I will pass one h1 element. Okay, h1 element I'll pass, and inside the h1 element I'll say demo. Okay, save it, and if you go to the browser now, you'll see that we have this demo now. Those app element is gone. So this is the only way we are injecting something to our index.html. So that is via this React DOM.render method. So I'll just bring back the previous logic, which is the app component we are injecting. So we can pass any component to this root element, and that will just display that in a page. So if you go to this app component, so as we discussed, this is a perfect example of a functional element. Okay, functional component. So we have a function. This is basically, as I told in a simplest form, a component is a function which is returning some React elements. Okay, and you can see we have a simple function here. Okay, and we are exporting that function app, and from this app we are returning something called this code, which is looking like HTML. Basically these are called JSX, JavaScript XML, and this is not exactly HTML. This is a JavaScript code. Okay, and to understand that how it is happening, and one thing, if you observe here, we are importing React here, but we are not using it. Okay, so that is the initial question I had, why we are importing React when I'm not using it, because in the project we'll see we're not using that. Okay, so to clear that, let me first comment it out, all this code here. I'll just comment it out, this code here. Okay, and I'll just remove it, not comment, I'll just remove that code. Okay, so we have a return now. So here what I will do, I'll use the React element which is there, where we are importing from React library, and there I'll use something called create element. There is a method called create element, and this method contains many arguments. Like we can see that we have 7 arguments, 3 arguments primarily. We can give many arguments to this. Okay, so first thing is I'll pass what type of element I want to insert. So in my case I want a h1. Okay, and the second parameter for now I'll give null, because we'll not go into that now. And the third one will be what is the value should be there. So in the text I will write this is using React element. Okay, so if I save this code, okay, if I go to my page, you'll see that we have those code displayed in the page. If I inspect this element, you'll observe this is a h1 element. See, we have a h1 element. This is using. So what we did basically, we just created element using create element method of React, okay, and we have passed that as an element. And what it was there previously, if I bring back the old code, whatever you are seeing here in this div is doing exactly the same thing. Behind the scenes, it will convert that into a react.create element. Okay, so in the latest version of React, we just omit that create element method, and we directly can pass as this we call as JSX, JavaScript XML. And we have some restriction here, like see, in our HTML we have something called class. We give class to make it some styling on this, but here we are giving class name because class is a reserved word in JavaScript. And as we know, we have a class component also. There we can see that class is a reserved word, so that's why we are not able to use it. So that's why we have a different property called class name. Okay, so this is looking like HTML, but it's behind the scenes it's converting it to those React element, React.create element. Okay, so that is what happening, and this is a functional element, as I told you. So what we'll do now, we'll basically create another element here. So to create one more element, I'll add one more JS file here, and I'll give that name child.js. Okay, and this one I'll create as a, so this app.js was the element. This is a functional element, correct? Because we didn't have any property, we don't in this case we don't have any state or property available to this function. It is just for your purpose. Okay, and there is another way we can create a component in React that we call as class component. And how to create that? We'll create a class for that. Okay, if I do this, see, I have created one class component that is called child. Okay, and I'm by default importing React component, and this child is extending that component from this React library. Okay, so as we discussed earlier, we are getting some additional feature with this class component. Like we have a render method here, which was not there in case of any functional component. Okay, so this, along with that, we have several lifecycle methods we'll be learning in this course, but this render is the main method which called whenever you are using this class. Okay, so now we will write some HTML code inside this. This is our custom class component which we created. So basically what I will do here, I'll add child component. And this is, and if I save this, and what I'll do, and I need to use that in the app.js, because at the end we are providing this app component to our index.js. So to use that, what I'll do, inside after this first thing I need to import that thing. So I'll go here and import our child component, import child, okay, from child. See this child. So now I have imported it, and I need to use this one here. So to use the user defined component or a so what we'll do is, I'll just create a tag here. Okay, and I'll just paste that thing. Okay, I can have single or a double, both. That will work exactly the same way. So if I save this now, okay, and if I go to my page, you will see one child component added here. Okay, and if you see the HTML, see we don't have any here. If I open this, it will be only header, will not have any. Let me open that header. This one is the child component we have. See, so we can create like this custom component. Okay, and we can refer that in a app component. In our app component we can refer that. Basically, so this is a functional component, and this child is a class component. Okay, so let me quickly change that, this function component, to a class component. So what we'll do, I'll just add class here, and I don't need this method class app extends React component. Okay, and before return I need to do something like render, because as I told you, with class component we have something called, and I need to put all this return inside this. Okay, let me copy paste from here and I'll put that here. Okay, so we'll not have any error here. So now we have changed our entire page. If I save it now, okay, and I'll get the exactly same output, because we didn't change anything. We just replaced our functional component to a class component. Okay, and this app is now a class component. So I changed it because I want to show you something about state. As I told you, we have in the functional component, we don't have state. We don't store any data. We directly modify or print the thing using props. Okay, so we'll see that using here. So what I'll do, I'll create another component here basically. So I'll give that child and functional I'll give, so that we can track all the thing. Functional.js. Okay, so this one will be a functional component. Okay, so we have a function component, so child functional we have created for this. I will give a simple header here, h1, and this will be, this is child function component. Okay, so as I told you, in function component will only represent or print something. We don't have access to store the data, and on the basis of data will not change our functional component. That's why we call this stateless component or dummy component, and basically it is there to reuse the HTML elements. Okay, we can create a navbar and we can use that. For that we create function component. And stateful component will that which will have a property, okay, and that we call as state, and it contains some data. Whenever the data will change, it will re-render this entire class component. Okay, so let me add a state to this class. So basically I will create one constructor, because for every class I will create a constructor. Okay, so inside the constructor, what I'll do, I'll call super. So why I'm calling this super? To access all the lifecycle method which is there inside component. Okay, if I call super, if it will give me all the accessibility to the parent component. Okay, and inside, after this I'll just define a state. As I told, state is a data state, where in state we store the data. So I'll just create, okay, let me create that state, this dot state, and this state, what I will do, this state is an object, so I'll create object. To create an object we use curly braces, and inside that I'll give a key value or property name that will be parent name. Okay, and the value of this will be app, because app is a parent component among the all others. So if I save it, now my requirement is I want to pass this parent name property, and this is a state for this app.js. I want to pass this to this child.js component which we are using it. Okay, so if I go to down, this is our child component. Here I will create a prop, so I can pass some value from a parent component to child component using props that we call as property. So I'll create a random props here, so I'll give that name as parent. Okay, you can give any variable name it was, and that will be inside a curly braces. I'll pass the current state. The state name is this dot state dot parent name. This is the value I want to pass to my child, so I'll just pass that here using a prop. And now I'll save this and go to my child component. This child component, I want to use that prop which I'm passing from this parent element. Okay, for that I'll create a header tag here to show that, and inside that I'll have parent element name, and the name should come from the state we have created there. Okay, so what I'll do here, I'll just add a curly braces, and inside the curly braces I'll use, because I want to use JavaScript code, so I'll use this. I told you we are passing that from parent component as a props, as a property. So inside the child component we'll have an object called props, and inside that we'll have something called parent, which is the name of the attribute we are giving in our app.js, where we are the parent component. See, this is we are giving parent, so that's what we need to refer that. Save it, and if I go to my browser now, you can see parent element name app we are getting. This app is not there inside the child component, is we are getting from the parent component app. Okay, So this is the way we can pass element from a parent to a child component. This is where we are using prop to pass it. So we have created one prop called parent, and we use this prop here to print that thing. Okay, so this is basically a function, a component. We can use props to print the element. Okay, similarly we'll do the same thing from here. Okay, and this will not have anything. This is a reusable component and will not use anything. And if I want to use this component in my app.js, so I need to create a app child functional, this one, correct? Child functional. If I go there, it's already imported. Okay, so child functional is there. So if I save it, you can see that this will be there inside our browser. See, we have already this child function component. We have already defined that in a browser. So we directly, and the only difference is this component versus this component is this is a class component. Okay, and this is a function component. The only thing is that this function component doesn't take any props, so always the value will be same. Okay, so these are static components, and we'll be using this as we will be reusing this component as a UI behavior, because there is nothing it will be changing here, because always it will give me this header. We are not modifying, we are not printing anything from props. So this is basically for UI reference. Okay, and this is a class component we have created where we have sent from parent element one property to this child component. Okay, so this is about our components, state and props. I'll be teaching something all based on life cycle. That will be in my next video. So for that, please subscribe to my channel. See you again.